Ahmed.
Okay, so hi everyone, welcome to the Cat Kings Inspire series. So today I've got this amazing speaker with us. I'm sure you guys would have remembered checking out Dr. Pavan Gandok's session with respect to entrepreneurship and how do you keep switching careers where you might be not remembering if you're seeing for the first time. Then I must tell you, Sir comes with an amazing background of studying, across universities, across countries. He's been at University of Melbourne, UCLA, Los Angeles, Singapore Management University. Currently, he heads the Jindal Global Business School. He's the vice dean there, and also been a professor for strategy. Something very interesting, like which is like an adaptive strategy. And today I have requested Sir to come and talk to us about something which is very intriguing. Like, you must be seeing that the economy is not been growing. There's a very sluggish growth there, but you see booming stock prices. So, we want to talk about this, and Sir is going to be sharing his insights with us on the same. Thank you so much, Sir, for coming on board.
Absolute pleasure, Anisha. My pleasure to be here.
So I would just want to start with, like, we remember reading an article about you, like somewhere around March, where you actually spoke about that this is what is going to happen. So, how did you actually back then predict this?
Sure. So, look, I think this is one of the key important lessons for your young listeners as they think about practicing and thinking about it's not just about maximizing a CAT score or an entrance test score. It is about developing the certain mental models and certain ability to think strategically and think about complex problems. And at the end of the day, वो कहते हैं ना, बाजी वही मारता है who can anticipate,
Correct.
right?
Correct.
So, you know, at the end of the day, it's about developing this capability of reading the patterns, right? And being able to predict where the puck is going to be moving in Wayne Gretzky's, terms, as opposed to, running the rat race. So you
Correct.
have to, as a, start to develop, and obviously that takes a fair bit of effort and experience to read the patterns, but it's at least to think about the next order ability over and above critical thinking, which is what we are testing in an entrance test like CAT, is to
Yes.
start to join series upon dots
Hmm.
of critical reasoning to form a more complex construct of strategic thinking.
Correct.
So the point here is that, obviously a year down the track, it's fairly easy for us to say that, this is the case, stock markets boom, and, it's fairly easy to say that that was going to happen. But in March, when I wrote that Fortune article, and I put myself on record to say that, the real economy, and at that point in time, people were thinking it was largely a supply chain China disruption problem, and put myself on record for saying no, this is a demand problem. The real problem will be lack of underlying demand in the real economy, and that problem will take a long period to fix. So it's not going to be a V-shape recovery or a U-shaped recovery. Unlike stock markets, which will boom back quickly, real economy will take a long time to recover. And that was relatively, and that prediction is obviously played out. And the underlying reason for that, the underlying reason that explains this disconnect between the real economy and the booming stock markets is the point that most Western developed nation governments have been misapplying stimulus spending.
Okay.
Okay. What's been, and there is another related part to this, that unlike that, in the case in India and other developing nations, we India is no spending nowhere near this proportion of their GDP in stimulus spending. So actually India is underspending on stimulus to boost the real economy. The West is overspending and misapplying that stimulus. right?
So if I may interrupt, for people like me who are not finance experts like you, what would, stimulus spending mean? And like, how do you make sure that you understand the real meaning of these things?
So first of all, this is not necessarily a finance concept. This is more of a macroeconomics concept. And stimulus is typically, from a macroeconomic perspective, the kind of spending that governments do to boost the economy in periods of economic downturn, to sort of avoid recessions or avoid major economic slowdowns. Governments, you know, sort of try to increase uh, government deficits and increase public spending on capital projects and job creating projects, and or direct benefit transfers direct to end individuals, right?
Okay. Got it.
So uh, uh, that is typically what is called fiscal stimulus or budget outlays by governments. And then there is, of course, monetary stimulus, which is reducing interest rates and making the cost of money so low, down to zero, near zero, and the availability of that funding available.
All
Now, the
right.
point is that the attempts by in the past year by developed country governments, like particularly the US, and you will be able to see some of these exhibits as we, you'll see some of these charts that they'll start popping up. That the majority of the trillions of dollars in the US that have gone in the name of stimulus
Mm-hmm.
have largely been an attempt at directing this money directly as stimulus checks to end individuals, direct benefit transfers.
Okay.
Unfortunately, a very large proportion of that money, instead of helping the poor, needy, put food on the table, or they take care of the basic dire necessities, a lot of that money is going into day trading accounts, as is well known fact
Mm.
apps like Robinhood and other such number of day trading accounts in the US and in many parts of the world, including in India, have gone up, really very rapidly. And there's also this continuing, sort of extension of this tech devta, anything remotely with the tech. And so, this expectation that, already stretched valuations have become even more stretched. And so you have, stocks like Tesla that are, now, nine times, have gone up 900%, et cetera, right? And so this phenomenon is not the the money which was meant to stimulate the real economy in an attempt to pass that money to individuals,
Mm-hmm.
that they would spend it in the real economy, right? On Main Street has not happened. Instead, that money has been invested in the stock market. And that is further compounded by the US Fed Treasury policy initiatives of lowering interest rates to near zero. And as, in essence, trying to use exactly the same medicine as was used in the 2008 global financial crisis, the so-called GFC, which is what my Fortune article of late March, early April last year talks about. And there's this is misguided. And so this combination of direct benefit stimulus to individuals that's gone into the stock market and low cost excess liquidity, which is moving around the globe. And that is obviously what is, there's no question or doubt that even the Indian stock market boom,
Correct.
perhaps nowhere near as crazy as the tech boom in the US stock market, but certainly fairly significant and frothy and stretch valuations, is effectively the excess liquidity in the US stock market, is chasing other emerging markets and has also found its way to India. Now, the
Correct.
point is that's what's explaining the the underlying cause for why we see this disconnect. But that's therein lies the other added opportunity, the other second interesting question, which is there is still a need for how do we get the real economy going, and interestingly, in India, we have, and other developing nations and emerging markets are underspending in this kind of stimulus building. And so there is an actually very interesting opportunity for India to take a lead, a global lead, to show the right path of how to do this sustainably, and effectively, to do not only effective building of real economy, but also do things that are good for the environment and sustainability.
Correct. So, sir, how do you think can India look forward to bridge this? Like, what more should they be doing?
Sure. So the point is that if you think about it, when the obvious answer, and the answer is obvious, but there is a need for leadership, because this is currently not happening. In most of the cases, the stimulus is being wasted. Huge deficits are being built up, but the money is being wasted in the manner that I just described. But the obvious answer is to say, when money is available at next to zero, and in some cases negative interest rates,
Hmm.
then that is the time to be building, investing in infrastructure that will be good for the long term. The
Okay.
key difference is that in many developing economies, the kind of infrastructure spending that they're doing is actually not the link between the infrastructure spending and green, or climate change benefit, or public health benefits, is very, very limited or tenuous. So there is an opportunity for India to take the lead in 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 two main ways. One, acting as a catalyst to redirect some of the Western stimulus spending, and sort of help attract and divert that stimulus spending from places like Japan, the US, and EU, to building much more uh, green, quote unquote, clean tech related infrastructure and technologies, which will both create jobs as well as meaningfully help transition the economy from a carbon economy to a low carbon or a no carbon economy. And this is the other interesting, there's also very interesting strategic geopolitical point here, that up until now, when we talk about that transition to decarbonize the economy, most of the technology and investment bets have been in solar and in lithium battery storage technology. And the interesting strategic point is that China fundamentally dominates both of these technologies and these industries. So they have a very significant control over not only lithium battery technology, but also strategic control of the raw material supply chain that feeds into lithium battery technology. And the kind of, as you can see from this chart that'll pop up, that their control of the installed capacity that China have in lithium battery technology far outdwarfs Japanese, Korean, or US capacity in that area. So, and given the obvious geopolitics with China, uh, it would be the equivalent of the Middle East control over petroleum reserves, going forward. So India needs to play a much more proactive, and there's an opportunity for India to play a much more proactive role in, again, helping facilitate a quad, in US, Japan, Australia, and other such, and perhaps even the EU, into taking much more strategic technology as well as investment shaping bets in alternative technologies to lithium battery, particularly things like hydrogen storage as well as carbon storage technologies, to really drive that pace and reduce that dependence in the future on China. Similarly, there is an excess focus and a risk of people focusing more on spending on the number of COVID related vaccines and the vaccine immunization types of efforts versus thinking about boosting public health infrastructure and public health spending for the next future pandemic. I
Correct.
mean, COVID may have been unprecedented, but
Hmm.
future such pandemics and other public health stresses are, as well as climate health, climate change related ones, are not going to be so unprecedented. And so, instead of all of the chatter about, well, can there be a consumerism bounce back and all of these things, and when can we go back to the same old habits? There needs to be much more strategic allocation of the trillions of dollars that are being sloshing around, of a few hundreds of billions being put into these kinds of strategic investments, which India clearly has an opportunity to not only take the lead for the Indian context, but actually take a global leadership, and provide a genuine magnet to countries such as Japan and Europe and the US, which would have logical reasons to support in these two areas, given the kind of vaccine development and vaccine production capability that India has, as well as in this green new sort of alternatives to lithium battery technology that need much more significant attention. So there are some thoughts for you and your students to mull
That's
over and chew.
really amazing. I think I'm sure this is going to help all the students who are preparing for interviews as well to, talk about things in terms of what you can talk about when you study about the economy, what is happening really in India and globally. And it's good and it's required to be well read, well informed. And I'm sure this interview with Sir is going to be absolutely helpful for all of them.
If I could leave your students with a joking one liner, it is दिमाग की बत्ती जलाओ और दिमाग की बत्ती मेंटोस खाने से नहीं जगती, खुद
Absolutely.
दिमाग खर्चने से जगती है.
Absolutely. I think that's going to be really helpful and that's going to be a key takeaway for everyone. Thank you
All the
so
best.
much, sir. Thank you so much for your precious time, sir. Thank you.
My pleasure.